mean, that was like an awakening experience. I don't know what drove him there, but whatever drove him there caused him to enter in. He so desperately needed that liberation, that freedom mark, and he found it there. So it doesn't matter whether we come there through the happy door, through the sad door. It doesn't really matter. Just get through the door, get on the other side of that. And so sometimes we think that meditation is all that there is, but it's no. Meditation leads to some place. It leads to something. And so it's not like to think that meditation is it. It's like to want to go from this room to that room and to go and stand right there in the doorway and say, I'm here. You have to pass through to the other side. So he talks about passing to the other shore, and then the other shore becomes this shore, that the duality or the dichotomy is broken, and that is the great awakening. And then it doesn't mean that so many things change out here, but because we are changed, the structure of appearances are different. It's like when they use that the metaphor of the Buddha going into hell, and he jumps into the hell of swords and knives, and it turns into a Buddha land. Because, as I say, we see the world not as it is, but we see it as we are. So everyone sees the world differently. And when we understand that, we stop demanding that we all have to see it the same way, because that's actually not possible, And so we have to learn how to be in together with others when everyone's reality is self-constructed. And he said, mind is chief. Mind made of whatever we think and ponder on, that becomes the inclination of mind. That becomes how we see and understand things. So if I'm always thinking he abused me, he beat me, he robbed me, he said those who harbor such thoughts their anger will never be appeased. And he said, but when we don't think those thoughts, even though he may have abused me, he may have beat me, and he may have robbed me, but when I'm not constantly fixated on that, then he said that my anger and my suffering is appeased. He said hatred is never overcome by hatred. He said it is overcome by... Okay, and he didn't use the word hatred. He used the word that we were trying to overcome, which was hatred. He said hatred is never overcome by hatred. It is overcome by non-hatred. So just in case you're confused about what love is, or what that would look like in this situation, if there is the hatred there, if there's the anger there, what would be the opposite of whatever it is from your space, from your inner space that you are experiencing, and the way you're holding it or being held by it and seeing it, what would be the opposite of that for you at this moment? He said that's where you need to turn your mind to then. And that's what will neutralize whatever it is that you are, the suffering that you are experiencing right now. And so this is how we get to this cooling, they call it a cooling off, and how things that have arisen cease. So when we talk about the arising and the ceasing of phenomena in all mental states, he's backing us up to how to actually neutralize everything. And it doesn't mean then that we just become a blob with a head on a stick body. It means that we can be with everything. There's not anything that can come into no vicissitude, whether it's praise or blame or loss or gain or pleasure or pain or fame or shame. The 8 worldly winds, none of them can take me down. They might truly happen, but they can't take me down, because I can understand the arising and the ceasing, and that I absolutely have ultimate control over that within me, within my own mind, that I actually do create my experiences. That are so powerful to know. That, because we do think we're at the mercy of externals. But if we hold to the truth of cause and condition, not just when it suits us, but if we're holding on to it all the time, and if we're not, if we're not settled on that, then that's another whole thing. But if we are of the mindset that all conditions are due to causes, and if I want the next moment to be better, then I'm going to I have to plant the causes that will sprout up and produce better fruit in the next moment, in the next week, in the next month, in the next year, in the next whatever. We didn't get to the state we are in overnight, but it's a pile up of causes, and this is the condition. This is the fruit, the outpicturing of all of our thoughts and our speech and our action over hundreds of years, over decades, over last night at the dinner table, but this is the outpicturing. If we want to know where our minds are, we could just look at what we have here. Whether it's acts of commission, things that we are doing that's not beneficial, useful, or helpful, whether it's acts of omission, failing to do something that's beneficial and useful. And when we're able to accept it in this way, then we can begin to work with it. And sometimes we don't know how to get started, how to jump start. We don't have to jump into the biggest thing. We had in Hendersonville, we've been having race dialogues, and that's like, you'd have to live there to know that that's not something we do. That's just not a thing for us there. We're back in the 30s or 40s. I mean, blacks are not downtown. They have their own little downtown. They don't, for the most part, go to the stores, except me and Panya Deepa, because they have their own little stores over there off of Martin Luther King Jr. Boulevard. We have, and it's a very, very segregated town. And I can remember when I moved there, when we would go to lunch, people would joke at the next table about, I wish we could go back to the days of Burr Rabbit and the Briar Patch and things like that, And so cutting your teeth on that kind of conversation, it was wonderful for me because it helped me have to find solace in the Dharma and what I said that I believe and what I hold true. But what it also does is it gives you not only tenacity but a certain kind of strength. I mean, you're not a weakling. You're not so fragile. Not so insecure. Not so easily wounded. Not so easy. And you can look past someone saying something, and really try to get to the heart of what one's dissatisfaction or complaint is. And it's a powerful tool that we could use today. Actually, we need more of it today because we're at a time where we're saying anything out of our mouths, and we're really damaging. We're bringing some awareness around things that we need to bring awareness to, but maybe they're a little bit more resourceful ways that we could do it, that we can say what needs to be said. There's a lot of cruelty in what we're saying, even if it's true. We should find ways to speak what is true in a way that can plant some seeds that's going to produce a better fruit, a better harvest for us, if that's our intention. And sometimes that's difficult because we're in the throes of our hurt, or we're in the throes of our needing to seize the moment, and everything's becoming so politicized, is that the word? And you're having to be so politically correct. And so I actually got, there's been something happening. We have like trouble in paradise too. We have things going on in Buddha land as well as in the world, right? And I have a group that's going to be meeting in a private retreat around some healing, for one of their teachers. And somebody heard about it, and they contacted me, said, are you going to really have him there? I said, he has grown students, and where he wasn't offered a path of reconciliation, they want to offer him one. And I think that that's their right. She said, well, aren't you concerned that someone would bring your integrity into question? I said, well, the only one who's done that so far is you. So, I said, one thing, whatever he's done, he's not bringing my integrity into question because I'm doing what the Buddha said, and, so, I mean, but it gives you the courage to do. So I know that in some ways, I'm going to get some blowback. That was the 411. That was her putting me on notice. If you don't do what we want you to do, this is like how it's going to go down as far as we're concerned. And while I appreciated that, they don't run anything over there. Just because they decided after 12 years to take some action, I could feel the same way about them. They should have taken care of this matter while it was small, before it blew up like this. And because now that somebody's looking at you politically and saying, what are you going to do about it? Now you want me to jump on your bandwagon? Let me do my own investigation, okay? So it's just being able to stand. And sometimes it's not popular, is what I'm saying to you, because we're concerned about how it will affect us. And sometimes we can't do the right thing because we are afraid that it will affect us adversely. And this is where we need to know that we're built up in the strength that a man does what he sees as right in his own eyes. Okay, so now don't leave me any notes about women too, because it's those kinds of ways that we major on the mind, is that we lose the essence of something that's a real child. It's a real cutting through. But when we fool around with it superficially, it might sound intelligent, but my master calls our worldly intelligence, he calls that scattered wisdom. And it's very useful for functioning in the outer world, but it's comparing spiritual things to spiritual things that it's not. It is not that useful. And so when we walk with our feet in both places, there's going to come a dominance. And is it worldly wisdom, or is it the wisdom of the sages? It's wisdom itself speaking, is at the core of our being. And so penetrating to really see that for the mind has no concept of that. That's why a lot of people, when they have one of these experiences, like they call them enlightening experiences, because like they break apart or, different, it's the mind trying to figure out what this is that's happening. It's like, instead of breathing air, you get what's that gas? Yeah. And, it like whacks you out because your body's not used to functioning with that. And we have like some of these experiences that like throw our ordinary mind off for a moment. And then we have to unpack that thing, and then we figure out, how to walk in a higher level, higher altitude. Yeah, it's like that. So this gets to be an exciting journey when we make the decision to move from mediocrity, yeah, and it becomes wonderful. I had not last year, the year before last, I had 3 falls, and so I had 3 concussions. And then it started getting really bad. My memory just was shot. I couldn't find files. I couldn't find words. I had a full calendar. And it was very difficult. And before that time, I never wrote anything out. Now I do write some things out because to remember or to jog my memory, and so it's a different way of living for me. because I had a photographic memory. So like if I read something, I know where it is forever in the book. You know, I can like just flip to it. Now I can like maybe 40% of the time. I know it's in the front of the book around, you know, something like that. So I didn't develop the skills. That's what I'm saying. I didn't develop the skills that we need for memorizing and things like that because of having a photographic memory. And this practice is a lot like that. We have to actually develop the skills because things will change in our life and we won't be able to rely on some things as we grow. And if we don't have that foundation, then when we get up to those those upper spaces, that's why some people go crazy. I mean, a guy just came in my Sangha about 3 months ago, and he came in to proclaim that he was enlightened, you know, and he wanted to take over my Sangha. And so we had a conversation, you know, and he came a couple of more times, and then he didn't come anymore. But then he came back about 2 weeks ago. I mean, because he was upset because I wouldn't let the enlightened master just take over. And he came back and he said, I'm over that. You know, he said, I did have a mountaintop experience, but I've come down the other side now. Now I realize, you know, I'm integrating that and just changing, you know, my position or how I understand the world and what our role is in it as practitioners. And it was so wonderful because you meet a lot of people and they go off the deep end and they're just gone. They're just gone. And that's one reason why our heart has to be fixed. Our heart has to be settled. We have to be, you know, like without a question, because you will be called upon, you know, to answer to the degree that you have put yourself out there. So this is not a fake it till you make it. This is one where we really turn inward. And at whatever level we grow, middling is good. You know, little bit is good. Just whatever vow you take, you know, live that. Be committed to that, and not to judge ourselves by others, and to not judge others by ourselves. You know, it's so important. Otherwise, we get into we get into gaming, you know, and trying to be something that we're not, or feeling condemned because we're not that. If you're too high, the Dharma can bring you down. If you're too low, the Dharma can lift you up, because both high and low are based on the sense of an individuated self. But the more we give ourselves away, you know, so that we can be used by others. You know, I know that's strong language. You know, there's a song we sing, I give myself away so you can use me. You know, and there is no sorrow in that, because that's my goal. You know, and if it's not your goal, don't say it, because you'll have opportunities for people to use you. But if you really are wanting to move into that space that there is nothing that you're clinging to, you know, that takes us to the beginning door of what the Buddha was talking about renunciation. Renunciation is not giving up houses and cars and lands. You know, it's recognizing that we are caught in these rounds of samsara due to our clinging and our craving and our grasping for being. And it doesn't mean that we won't be. It just means that we give up the grasping and craving for being, and then we can truly be, you know. And so it's giving up the counterfeit for what is real. And that you can only know through direct experience. It's like having one time I was with a teacher and And I asked her, I said, well, Master, what is the difference between, like a ordinary, like a practitioner and a master, like how you get to be a master? That was really my question. I'm trying to ask it in the right kind of way, And she said, well, the only difference between one who is a master and one who's not is that a master knows that they are one, that they are a master. That's the only difference, and so they can operate in their mastery. She said, but I'll tell you this. She said, a dead master is like a dead husband. Not much use to you. Find yourself a living one, And, because I was like, Buddha said this, and Buddha said that, and Buddha said this, and Buddha said that. She said, find yourself a living master, and then you can experience something. And so we should hold our teachers really in high esteem, because the one who shares the Dharma is valuable. It's as valuable as the one whose Dharma it is, because our faith in it comes by hearing, and we can't hear the Buddha's voice right now. And so that one, and when we hold the teacher in esteem in that way, it inures back to us. It's not to give the teacher anything, but it is so that I can really reap the benefits of what is being offered. So I am the recipient. I get the reward of the honor that I give to the teacher. And so and that's how I should look. It's like I never have a problem holding a room, But if my teacher walks in the door, I step away. I don't know when my students going to learn it, but that's just Pannavati, and they just keep right on going, But when she comes in, that I step aside, and she could say something that I didn't even totally agree with. I won't challenge her to show I know something, But if I have a question about it, I'll talk to her, ask her privately about it, or something like that. And so, in finding these ways of just having a basic humility, and not thinking we know so much, but just don't think we know so much. Understand what I mean? I mean, we can hold fast to what we know, but we don't have to make it a badge, of honor for ourselves, because then we cut ourselves off from the openness and the availability of the wisdom that we can only get when we're not so identified with ourselves, having a thirst, making a deep inquiry. I think it was Paul who said, it would be a shame that after I preach to everybody else, that I myself become a castaway. And so I see a lot of teachers out here today, and it's almost like it's like a rock star mentality, and it can be very detrimental to us if we don't hold all of this in a certain way, in a very, very serious way. I joke and laugh more than anybody that I know. I used to get letters all the time say it's not fitting for a monk to be so happy. Okay. I say, okay, thank you. And that's it. I'm through with that. There's nothing else to say about that. They were called the happy ones, and I think it was for a reason, and they were also called the analyzers. So once you deeply, cut through and analyze the teachings, it's like squeezing the a lemon on that lemon squeezer thing, and you can get, and it can do it so cleanly. You can squeeze a lemon like this, you look at it, it's all up whole. But when you put it in that thing and you squeeze it, it takes it right down to the inner skin. And it's like that. That's how the Dharma does, if we will allow it to wring us out. So wherever I find that I'm lacking in the Dharma, I note that. Sometimes I can work on it. Sometimes I don't have an inclination. I'm not inclined to work on that thing right there that you think I need to work on. I'm working on this over here that I think I need to work on. So I may not have an inclination to work on it, but I still make note of it. I still hold that high as a teaching, even if I disagree with it. Come around 3-4 years later, I totally agree with it. How could it be any other way? But it's by not casting it aside, just sitting it over there for now. So a lot of things I heard a decade ago that I was totally against, today I'm like, how could it be any other way? But there's the ease that comes with being able to look at additional information without feeling that what you already have is being challenged. That's our greatest hindrance to growth. Afraid that what we already hold fast to will be challenged. But here's the truth. I would rather, I desire to have truth in the inward parts. How about you? I'd rather to know for something to be true than for me to just keep acting as if I'm right. I want to be right, but I want to be true. And if we can hold fast to that desire for truth, then when things come into our life, certain and we are challenged, what we believe is challenged, or even sometimes, he said you can say this is true because you may have had a direct experience of it. That this has helped. This has, been beneficial. He says you can say this is true, but don't say and this only is true. And so for ones who have a propensity towards devotion, there he gave the teachings. That's where all the teachings about the Brahma Viharas came about. All the teachings about the 31 planes of existence, about the immaterial planes. There's a whole section in the Anguttara Nikaya on conversations with the devas, different kinds of devas, different classes of devas, and with the Brahmas. And he talked about all these things and going to Tashita heaven and ministering to his mother, and that where he was before he came here on this earth. Now, somebody asked me if I believed in ETs, and I said yes, and they looked at me so strange. I said, you can't tell me that you honestly believe that in the whole scheme of things, in the hundreds of billions of universes, that we human beings are at the highest of the pecking order. And, I'm sure you can't believe that, and that this is the only planet that has intelligent life, and we're not that intelligent. So, so to me, it's a no-brainer. What would be the point? It's really, it's not like I want to meet any of them or have any kind of relationship. I just believe every classification of being should be with their buds, should be with their peers. So let the ghosts stay with the ghosts. I call on a few devas here and there because they are to me like I am to my pets. We're two different classifications of beings, but I have some pretty good skills. I can open a can and put food out for them. I can know when they're sick. I can divine transportation, take them to the doctor, all these kinds of things. They can't do that for themselves, but I can do that, and it's not like it's such a big deal, or a great trick. It just falls within my classification of being. And so it is with other beings. It is with devas, or in other disciplines they call them with angels, as it is with the different deities. It's like it's no big deal. But it's very wonderful. If you have relationships, with good friends, they don't just have to be human. Same way we're good friends with pets, or our pets know us as good friends, right? We're crossing classifications all the time. It's just where our mind draws the line, is what I'm saying to you. It's just where our mind draws the line. So I'm throwing some of these things out so that you can begin to research for yourself what brings one's joy up when they come to the end of the intellectual road, and how do we make that journey from the head into the heart, and how do we move from existing to really living, and how do we move from ordinary wisdom to the prajna that the Buddha talked about. There are some who say he was omnipotent and all of that, but he never said that. He never said, I know everything. Actually, he said he did not know everything. He said, but whatever I direct my mind to, that I can penetrate. So that's different than knowing everything. It is having the capacity to cut through, to penetrate, and know something. Whatever he had so perfected, his qualities of mind, that he could direct it, and the percipient light that was in him would shine on that, and he could understand it all together. So that's the great hope for us. We don't have to try to get wisdom. The getting of wisdom will come. It comes joined to the opening of the heart, the cultivation of the pure heart, the cultivation of a happy heart, a joyous heart. It speaks of joy as an enlightenment factor. And how can we, so if we don't have it, know that there's not going to be any enlightenment. There's not going to be any awakening, because it comes through a vehicle of joy. And a lot of people came to the Dhamma, and they were like, my son died, my spouse died, the house burned down. Even the Buddha came to it because he was like disgusted. He woke up one morning, and this is why I know I had an insight, because I like food. I like food a lot. And I went out to lunch with a couple of people in my Sangha the other day, and I looked at the table after we finished eating. And it was like piled up with, like the garbage, what was left from our meal. And I looked at it, the food was delicious. I loved it. The ambiance, sitting out on the lagoon, all of that, perfect. And I looked over at what was left after we finished eating, and I was repulsed. I said, we're just human garbage cans. And it was a shift for me. And this was about 4 days. And it's still difficult to even bring my appetite back, because I'm seeing it in a different way, And so that's we don't have to be afraid of growing. Now that's something that needed work on in me, you see. I'm not speaking for anybody else but me. And I'm diabetic, and I still eat sweets and chocolate and sodas and stuff all day because I like them. How crazy is that? But I know that a change is occurring now, you see. And this wasn't like I wrote out a request and passed it and they're filling it. But at some point, your work, your efforts ripen. They ripen. And when they ripen, then the scales fall from your eyes. Nobody can cajole you into it, threaten you into it, whatever. My mother had her feet cut off, then had her legs cut off, then had her thighs cut off, and she was just sockets in a bed from diabetes. Did that do anything for me? No. I couldn't understand why she couldn't control her appetite. Now I understand. I have it. And so this was a wonderful insight for me because the actual repulsiveness was there. Now I can work with that because that was my own realization. You see what I mean? So we can't force people into things. But as we just keep lightly touching, lightly looking, holding something, it comes, it stacks up, and then it topples over, and you have the insight, you have the realization, and then you can quickly accomplish the work. So the $64,000 question is, are we willing to abdicate the throne of self for others? When we feel like it, yeah, we say. But even when we don't feel like it, that's where the challenge comes in. And he said that the sons of the Buddha all practice this way. The sons of the Buddha all practice this way. So now, what is that? That sounds like the Bodhisattva path. So our tradition came out of, I like to call it the Nikayas, as opposed to Theravada, because Theravada wasn't in existence in the beginning, but it is the outflow of some of the schools that emerged shortly after the Buddha passed. And so we think that we have the Arahant or Arahanta ideal, and then later came the Mahayanas, and they have like the Bodhisattva ideal. But if you read in the Majjhima Nikaya, and it was really, I borrowed this book, and I turned to Sutta 128, and look what she wrote up here. It says, Pannavati on community. So I must have talked about this 2 years ago or 3 years ago, and she had it marked, in her book. But here he was talking to Anuruddha, and I love this. I love this sutta because the Buddha was talking about how we strive or abide diligent, ardent, and resolute until we reach our goal. And he said, well, the way I do that is that, we consider how wonderful it is to be in harmony and fellowship with these great friends in the Dhamma. So why should I do what I want to do? Why not do what they want to do? That's how important their friendship is for us. And he said, good. And while you abide thus diligent, ardent, and resolute, have you attained any superhuman states? Distinction in knowledge and vision worthy of the noble ones? And he said, well, we do sometimes in meditation, we perceive light and a vision of forms, but soon after the light and the vision of forms disappear. And we have not discovered the cause for that. And the Buddha said, Anuruddha, you should discover the reason for that. Before my enlightenment, while I was still an unenlightened bodhisattva, I too perceived light and form and vision of forms in meditation. And soon after, they would fade away. And I wondered, what is the cause for that? And he said, and then I considered thus, inattention arose in me. And because of inattention, my concentration fell away. So I'll practice in the future so that inattention will not arise in me again. You see? So he just took the investigation more than my mind just wandered. What is the cause for that? And he discovered one time it was inattention, another time sloth and torpor, another time fear arose, another time elation arose, another time inertia arose. Another time, excess energy arose. Another time, deficient energy arose. So every time he meditated, he reflected, coming out of that meditation, what just happened. And he would look at what kept him from moving on. How come I didn't become a Buddha in that sitting? What happened? What was going on for me? And he recognized then these various states of mind that were diverting his attention and that cut him off from the path. And when he saw that clearly, he said, then I shall practice so that that won't cut me off going forward. Otherwise, we just keep sitting and getting up and sitting and getting up and sitting and getting up. But when we are reflecting, when we're analyzing, when we're looking to see what cut me off from the path, and it could be inattention, fear, excess energy, inertia, boredom. But we start to recognize what it is. And now that we've named it, now that we've put it out in the light, we can be more aware. It's like when you uncover something, as long as it can hide in the dark, it's there. But once we uncover it, then it can't hide from us anymore. You can't unknow a thing once you know it. That's it. That's what's so wonderful. You can't unknow once you know. But he was speaking of two things: distinction in knowledge and vision that came from a superhuman state, a super consciousness. And so the question is, how do I get into that state? Now, he told us how to get into that state in Sutta number 62. I think it's 62. Because his son asked, how do I do this mindfulness of breathing that's of good effect and good result? And he talked to him in writing for 3 pages before he got to the mindfulness of breathing that is of good result and good effect. He said, first you have to let your meditation be like the elements: the earth, the air, the fire, the water, the space. He said you can spit in the wind, you can, throw debris on the ground, you can, and he was, you can throw trash into the fire and say that it's not offended, it's not humiliated. And it's not repelled. He said, let your meditation be like that. That means that when I sit down in meditation, I can't sit down and start meditating. I have to first set aside all covetousness and grief for the world. So when I'm sitting down for this period of time, this 15 minutes, this 30 minutes, whatever, I'm doing this. I'm not bringing into this session any feelings I have about what you did to me yesterday and what I have to do tomorrow. This 15 minutes is set aside just for laying aside all of my grief or covetousness. That's the 2 extremes for the world. So, and we work at doing that first, really committing that this is what I want to give this 15 minutes to that. We have a way of being committed to things we really want to do. So first is, how bad do you want it? How much do you really want to give yourself to this? It's not like a practice. He said, practice like your hair is on fire. And so when I sit down to meditation, I'm like that. And the way that I practice like my hair is on fire is that I arouse a great devotion for the Dharma, for the instructions, for the pointing, I arouse a great gratitude, and I'm excited to sit. I'm excited to sit. I have to tamp down the excitement. I take 3 breaths and I'm giddy. I have to tamp it down. You might have to, pump it up. It just depends on which side of that you're on. But you should know where you are. What does the meditation mean to you? And we're making contact, with wisdom itself, with compassion itself, the quality in us, bringing it up is what we're doing. Not something we're reaching for out here, but it's already in us. And we're reaching, bringing it up. And when I feel a little bit of it, you hold it, whatever amount is arising. You hold it and you nurture it. Pay attention to it. The mind won't travel. The mind just travels when you're no longer really holding it and paying attention to it. Doesn't make sense to have an hour sit and 5 minutes of being focused. Better to have 5 minutes of being focused and then get up. Until you can make it 10 minutes of being focused and then get up. And you can make it 15 minutes of being focused. And then like you're on a roll because the whole time you were there, you were focused. And you start to feel your mastery. Your self-mastery, and the joy that comes from accomplishment. And so he said that, when you develop meditation that's like this, arisen, agreeable, and disagreeable contacts will not invade your mind and remain. And then when he finished that, he said, now after you do that, develop meditation on loving kindness. And when you do, ill will not be able to arise. And on compassion, when you do, no thoughts of cruelty can arise. And on altruistic joy, and when you do, no discontent can arise. No envy can arise. No jealousy can arise. And on equanimity, and if you do, no aversion can arise. So he's telling us, that's Sutta number 62. And if you want it, that's a preliminary on before going into meditation. And then when that's done, he said, then go and sit. And establishing mindfulness in front of you, ever mindful, breathe in and breathe out. Breathing in long, that's a long breath. Breathing out, that's a long breath. Or if you breathe in a short breath, compared to the last one, that's a short breath. And that's all he asks us to do in the beginning. But once we've gotten settled in that way that all distracting thoughts, all of our hindrances are down, now we can practice. And then he goes on. And he says, breathing in, experiencing the whole body. I'm aware of everything that's going in here. There's the endorphins releasing. My body is becoming relaxed. My mind is becoming relaxed. I'm just aware of this. I'm not doing anything but breathing in and out. And I'm seeing all these physiological changes going on in the body just as a result of paying attention to the breath. And then he says, breathing in and breathing out, I shall tranquilize my bodily formation I'm just allowing the body to be at ease. And we get used to sitting in that way. Then when we're in a situation where something's coming up for us, like somebody's saying something and that's not in accord with what we know to be true or what we think is happening right here, we can tell in a second because the body gives it away. When you feel the troubling in the body, then you know. You know, the body picks that up, and that's how you learn how to cut that off as soon as you feel it arising, because you've been in a place where you know what it feels like when the body is tranquilized and when the mind is tranquilized. And then he says, breathing in, he trains thus. And then he goes through 16 things that we train on. And one of them that I love is, I shall breathe in, gladdening the mind. He trains thus, I shall breathe out, gladdening the mind. I shall breathe in, liberating the mind. I shall breathe out, liberating the mind. Now, if I didn't know this, I would be reading it every time before I sat down to meditate, kind of steering the mind, educating the mind, if you will, about what we're doing here for this next period of time, so that the mind knows, you know. So the heart is cluing in the mind. And he says, this is how. And then he goes down to the last parts, you know, contemplating impermanence. After liberating the mind, contemplating impermanence, contemplating fading away, sounding dire now, contemplating cessation, you know, contemplating relinquishment. So it's step by step that we give up the self. And every time we sit in meditation, we're practicing giving ourselves away. We're practicing coming to the cessation, the fading away of self, the relinquishment. And he said, that kind of mindfulness will be of great fruit and great benefit. And when mindfulness of breathing is developed and cultivated in this way, even our final in-breath and out-breath will be known as they cease. They will not be unknown. So, this is just not a practice for being happier, but he's talking about overcoming life. He said, if there is the born, there is also the unborn. So it's not nothing, but it's just not anything that we can describe from our side. We don't have any words for it. You know, he didn't even have words for it. He said, but it can be known. Known by heart. The Dhamma must be known by heart. So somewhere along the line, we got into this groove of, two kind of schools, the Theravada or Nikaya schools and the Mahayana schools. And back to that, you see this apple, it's a banana thing. Well, one of the Mahayanists around 150 AD, 150 years after the time of the Buddha, started this division. Actually, the Mahayanas and the Nikayanas flowed together, some having more of an intellectual bent, some have more of a devotional bent, but there was, like really one thing, there was Buddhayana, And so Nagarjuna comes along and he says that this understanding that we have as Mahayanas and we identify with the Bodhisattva, like that's not in the Nikaya school, They're only after arhatship. But so they want enlightenment for themselves, but we want enlightenment for all beings, So ours is a greater enlightenment. That's what Maha means, the higher or the greater. And then he called those who were searching for enlightenment, but not for all beings, but for themselves, the Hinayana, or the lesser vehicle. And that's how we got this dichotomy of the greater vehicle and the lesser vehicle. But it's like that apple and that orange, because if you remember, in the beginning, the Buddha said, for what reason do we do this? To be a refuge for all beings. There it is right there. That just completely nixes the Mahayana's whole claim to superiority. Yeah? I'm sorry. I love going to Mahayana places because, I just take it out and I read it to myself. Just got to deal with it, And so you should stop saying that. So within Theravada, we have Mahayanas, and within Mahayana, we actually have Theravadins or Theravadas, and so it's not based on what school you belong to. It's based on what your great aspiration is. Understand what I mean? So in this way, there can just be Buddhayana. And so if you hear me teach something that seems to come out of the Mahayana, then we should say, oh, but this is not what we embrace, because there is just Buddhayana. Okay, so where I'd like to go now is someone asked me a question, and I want to open up for some questions. And her question, I think I want to read it, is, would you say more about the Me Too movement? Very curious. And I'm like, okay, somebody trying to get me in trouble now. What I'd like to say is that the Buddha expressly encourages us to do all things in moderation, and to make sure that our motivation, is right. He said, think about a thing, before you say it, and before you do it, and while you're saying it, and while you're doing it, and after you say it, and after you do it. He says sometimes we start off with a really good intention for, correcting something, turning something right side up, for addressing something. And when we get into the middle of it, our motivation changes a little bit. Then it may come some vindictiveness, not like, I want them to pay. I want, and he says that if you get to that place and you discover you got a little bit off base, he says, stop right there. Just stop right there. The intention was really good, but when you got into it and, then, and you could see that it's getting a little bit mean, sometimes over the top, but what are you going to do? I mean, where nobody can even say anything, nobody can even try to bring any balance into anything, or you become, become the enemy. You can't even try to speak peaceful resolution or anything, or you become the enemy. And I think that has to do with just the temperature in the atmosphere right now. But remember the quote I was reading from the sutta? He said, I didn't read the first part of it. It said, when many voices shout at once, no one thinks himself a fool, you know. But because of their anger, they shout and say, you beat me, you abused me, you robbed me. He said, I tell you that approaching it in that way, you will not have any peace. And so he tells us that we have to take care of matters. We have to take care of issues. But there is a wisdom in which we can do it that will make the end product be what we were aiming for. And so I'm a great proponent of the Me Too moment. But I do have a certain dignity in the Dharma that I would try to walk it out in a way that is compassionate and yeah, that's what I would say. So I'd like to see a little bit more compassion in the dialogue. That's all I want to say about that. Yeah. And maybe there won't be, so be it. Just really thinking deeply and counting up the cost. You know what I'm saying? Wow, you can really hear a pin drop now. Yeah. Did I say too much about that? I thought I did pretty good. Yeah. Okay. Any other questions? Yes. Or not just a question. Comment, yes. Doesn't have to be a question.
Okay. I was just trying to think how to pose this question. When I'm trying to put myself in someone else's shoes to understand their side, maybe somebody I'm angry with or somebody who's hurt me, and I can see that there might be a tendency to for it to flip over into something like I'm superior, like when you're talking hurt people. Okay, this person is hurting, and I get that or whatever. I understand it, but poor thing.
I understand what your question is.
And I find it's a very close. Of course, I guess I forget the Buddhist terms because I'm nervous. But anyway, the far enemy, near enemy kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
But
I understand.
Yeah, and I just wondered. I guess just paying attention, but I just wanted to hear what you might have to say about that.
I know what you're asking me. The best way is not to try to put yourself into their position. It's more like recognizing within yourself when you've been in their position. And that's the difference. Because you can identify with your own stuff. Trying to identify with theirs might be, a bit of a stretch, or it's certainly an exercise in imagination. But within our own experience, we know times when we've made a misstep, or we know times when we've done something wrong, or we know times when, we weren't able, that we felt hurt. because of the actions of somebody else. And so in that sense, it's seeing the person as oneself, as opposed to us trying to put ourselves into their position. I can recall my hurts. I got a whole tick list. I could pull it up at any time. I got a long memory, so I can go back really far, about and revisit something from my own life and remember how I felt, how that made me feel, or after I said that thing that I couldn't take back. I remember when I had to. I wanted to fire someone, and what I try to do is let them see that it's not the best place for them, and they leave. So that's the way I prefer to handle, for you to just realize that you're not happy, and I understand, and rather than for me, to have to let them go. And there was a young lady, and she came to that realization, that she just wasn't happy. This is just not her way. And so I accepted that, and wished her well. And she was going to go to the end of the month. And in her particular role, she had to handle things when they came up. And it's no big deal, like scheduling or whatever. I felt it was no big deal. But it was a point of anxiety for her. Had gotten to a point of anxiety. And her anxiety started showing up in the emails. And I'm thinking, just one more week of this. And I sent that. I didn't just think it. I typed it in an email and sent it to the director and said, here's her latest complaint, just one more week. And that was a very valuable lesson to me, because the director got it. I didn't send it to her, I sent it to the director. And the director got it, and she thought I meant for her to read it and send it on to her. And that's what she did. And then she calls me and says, Pannavati, I think I just made a mistake. I said, no, you didn't make the mistake. I made the mistake. Because I didn't have to say just one more week. You see what I mean? And we were planning a goodbye party for her that night. And she told everybody she was too sick to come. But it's because her feelings were hurt. And I hurt them, And that was a very valuable lesson, no matter how frustrated you get. Like, just let your frustration be yours and let somebody else's be theirs. Don't pass that on. And so in this way, if we just think about how we feel or how we regret something that we did that we can't take back. Once it's out the gate, you can apologize, tell the cows come home. No, but you can't unhurt a person. Was it so important to say that? No, it wasn't. And so it's like that, Is that helpful to you? Will that? Mm-hmm. Okay, great. Yes.
Thank you. Sometimes it seems like enlightenment is the goal. That it's sort of like if you practice hard enough, or that, eventually you'll get there, or that sort of thing. And that I don't think that's such a helpful frame. And I just wondered what you thought about that.
Oh, yeah. So I hear that a lot, like enlightenment is the goal. Like I don't know, but when I go to play a game, I want to win. So it is the goal. Now, I might not understand exactly what that's going to be like, but, there is a goal, and you can't really run with diligence without running towards your goal. We have a way of efforting, though. That's where the difference comes in pressing to be something, and on one hand he does say, put forth effort. It's an enlightenment factor. He speaks of these 37 things that we have to arouse in order to reach our goal. But it depends on how we define what the goal is. And so how would you define the enlightenment? Would you find, we have some pat things like waking up to the nature of reality. We have this jargon. For me, though, it is dropping the illusion of a personal self and attaching around that causes this me to stay in these rounds of rebirth in an illusory world. That for me is what it is to be unenlightened, and to be enlightened, to wake up, is to come to the end of that mental proliferation. And so he says that it's not that it's not nothing, it is something. Now, this is where the language gets tricky, because some people might call that then that there is some kind of eternal something, if it's the opposite of impermanence, that there is permanence. Okay, but he cautions not to misunderstand the notion of eternity from our unenlightened place of reasoning. He's saying it's not what we think of as eternal, because then it is something being eternal. And so he says, don't go there with it, because we won't come away with the right understanding. It's like the frog and the fish, and they're in the pond, and the frog hops out and hops around for a while, and he comes back, and the fish says, where you been? And he says, oh, I've been hopping around on land. He says, land? What's the land? The fish has no reference for land. So he says, so what I'm talking to you about, you have no reference for. And when you try to create a reference from what you already know, then know that that's not it, And so there is a goal, and I know it's that way. He says, go that way. And in that sense of just going that way takes away the kind of emphasis on an end goal that allows one to enjoy the moment by moment awakening that is occurring, each stepping into freedom, more and more freedom. So in a way we do it, in a way we don't. That's the whole paradox. It's like dancing on the head of a pin. But a lot of times the fifth patriarch, in Zen it says nowhere to go and nothing to do. There's nowhere to go and nothing to do when you've been somewhere and done what needed to be done. But before that time there is somewhere to go. There is something to do. But you hold it in that middle way, not too loosely, not too tightly. Yeah. And then it becomes an enjoyable journey, learning all the way, but knowing that you're moving towards something. So a lot of us feel a sense of dissatisfaction because we don't feel like we're moving towards anything. We feel like we got it pretty much, or got all that can be gotten, or something, and we're like just coasting, or we're sitting. But we know, because the that which propels us forward, which helps us to find joy when we overcome every obstacle, which gives us the strength to be courageous, going into situations that can be, fraught with consequences, and yet we can approach it boldly. Like that's just an aspect, a part of living, as much as breathing is. It's that, and when we still have that, then we know that we're still moving towards a goal, and we've not become stagnant. Yeah. Okay, as soon as she finished.
So I once learned that, I was told, and then I really integrated it, that compassion, the start of compassion is truly believing that the other person or other thing happening, that everyone is doing the best they can with what they got at that given moment. And that's just the start of compassion. And then you move into kindness, and then you try to have to balance that with the truth of the situation or the drama or whatever is unfolding. I find that's the part I generally, I can get all the way through the kindness, but the balance between truth, kindness, and compassion. And can you comment on that?
Yeah. One of the practices that I do is seeing all beings as my kind mother. Now, it was a hard practice for me, and that is an actual, Tibetan practice, seeing all beings as one's kind mother. Well, first of all, my mother wasn't kind, so I had a little problem right there, and at the time that I started it, I didn't really have the notion that, since the beginning of time, we've all been swimming in this sea of samsara, and so really every one of you have been my mother. I have been your mother. So neither one of those concepts were working for me. But then I realized that, I came out at a time when Memorex was big, so they don't use those kinds of tapes now. But the advertisement was this lady would hit a high C and the glass would shatter. And then they say Memorex. So you'd remember and saying you couldn't tell whether it was real or whether it was Memorex. And it's funny how things come to your mind that can help you. Our minds are extraordinary. And so I think like that. So this is a method, a skillful means that I employ. Like first, what would I consider a perfect mother then? Then I imagined that perfect mother, a mother who would do this. That it certainly was, I couldn't look at me and how I related to my children because she was far from perfect, and I learned a lot of lessons from my own mother. So I couldn't rely on, I'm a good mother and look at myself, but I would just imagine what a perfect mother could be, and then imagine that every person that I encounter in this life through karmic, connection has been my mother. And that's how I began to change my view of people. And so the balance comes for each individual, it's different. One may need to add more kindness, in kindness is no more than loving being kind. So I was in a family where nobody liked being kind, so I didn't learn kindness. I didn't know what it looked like, didn't really know what it felt like, except my father. So he was my image of kindness, not my siblings, not my mother, not anybody else in my whole line, just this one man, and I saw what love was. I could put attributes to it: patient, kind. He was also so humble. He was, he would do anything to help anyone. And yet this was a rough tumbly, fighting kind of guy if you got on his wrong side. But I could always look and hold to those parts of him that were so kind to me, to let me know I mattered, and I could balance out all the other stuff, balance out that seesaw. And so that's how we have to be, looking to see where we're deficient, know where we're strong and where we're deficient, and just build up that part that is deficient. Don't bring down the part that's strong, build up the part that's deficient. And you'll find that it's easy to do because we've done it all to one extent or another. It's just, am I willing? The willingness to apply it to this situation right here. The willingness is the question. And that's not one of the words that we use, when we're talking about wisdom and compassion, la, 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 la. We never talk about the willingness. Am I willing, in this situation to allow this thinking to prevail, to allow this heart to come forward? Even if my child murdered someone, I would still love my child. Okay. Can you love a murderer who's not your child? That's the question. And so in my family, when it happened, that was my challenge. Could I love a murderer who is not my child? And the answer was, I can. So yeah, thinking first of all that we're all doing the best we can, but sometimes we say, oh no, I know that's not your best. I know you can do better than that, you just don't want to. Yeah? And so we have a play in the circumstances that fall out. There was a woman, and she didn't like me. She came to our Sangha for about 5 or 6 years. She did like Pannavati very much. And she could really get something from Pannavati. So I was glad for her to come to the Sangha. Anytime, I was happy to see her. Even though she was gritting on me, like, it didn't bother me, But it was only when she became disruptive and was disturbing others, that I knew I had to do something. So if she came in and then I sat on the Dharma seat, you'd hear, oh, and just move it, and then she'd grab the pocketbook and she started fishing around in the pocketbook, rattling keys, looking for chewing gum, and she was doing it. So one day, and she would do that every time, it was my time to get the Dharma, and I said, okay, this is not good. So she came in and she did it, her usual thing, getting bolder and noisier with each time. Nothing was said, and finally I said, excuse me. I said, you see that door right there? I said, there's no lock on it. And that's all I said. And she turned beet red, and she never rattled a key or went searching in her pocketbook or had any from that time on. She totally got the message. I didn't have to say anything nasty to her. I just said, see that door, there's no lock. Which meant, yes, she did. She knows her. Yeah, and she came back. Actually, she thanked me. She said, you're a lot like me. I said, no, I'm not. I said, no, I'm not. Yes.
Hello. I've been trying to combine liberal Christianity with insight meditation. For me, I think I've worked it out in my mind that they do go together. But do you think maybe it would be better to really choose one and stick with one? I do centering prayer, and then in the rest of my life I try to be insightful about my thoughts and feelings.
So I think that is very integrated, don't you? If you've learned to integrate it, then you've answered your own question, so you can feel very comfortable with that. A lot of times, the only time I offer any advice is when people have not been able to integrate it. Like you're coming to the Insight Center and you're full of fear because you think that God's going to strike you dead for this because then we have a conversation about things. But you see, it's not so much, the Buddha said, when you put something in practice and you know that for me, this leads to my well-being, for me, this encourages me to increase my virtue and my sublime qualities, he said, then you stick with that. The way we've cookie cut and divided everything up is not particularly useful. And even within Buddhism, we've got so many schools, so we've got, 6 or 7 Tibetan schools, and then you've got your different Chan sects, and then you've got your Theravada, and then you've got your Vipassana or Insight, but it's not exactly the same because there are a lot of things that we hold that maybe you don't put attention to. So we've broken all of this down into all of these different sects, this sectarianism. But, we did that. Unenlightened minds did that, But one can know for oneself what one needs. And you don't have to call it anything, right? Yeah.
I really appreciated what you shared with us earlier about coming to neutral. And this has been a central theme of mine recently. Is there anything else that you can share with us when something's coming at us, we perceive that they're hurting us in some way, that we can be more skilled at coming to that neutral place without being codependent?
Thank you. I understand your question. So the bad news is that doing the right thing has nothing to do with the outcome. It involves you and somebody else, and you might do the right thing and they don't, So if we, he said, reality is not that if you do the right thing, the good things are going to always be the end result of that. And if we're expecting that, we're going to be disappointed. Like, this doesn't work because I did all the right things and look what happened, And so one has to be really willing at that time to accept the notion of cause and condition, that being it's impossible for this to happen except that the conditions actually, came together such that it could. And in that way, we're not too judgmental on our part, on our side, or the other person's side. We can just be with the moment. This is where we are now. How do we make the next moment better? And that's the first part of that. I mean, that's a base understanding you have to have before, because it'll help that question, that question not come up so much. So once we are at the place that we do what is right and we're not attached to the outcome, that means I did the right things and I expected this to happen, then we can be with what happens, and we can decide, we do get to decide how far we can go in accommodating something. We can go as far as our capacity. A lot of times we get into trouble because we go beyond our personal capacity to accommodate something, and we end up biting off more than we chew. Than we can chew. Sometimes we hold a certain ideal or a certain standard in our mind, and we want to live up to that. But that's like spending money that you don't have in the bank, So we have to accept also our limitations and do the best we can. It's just that when we say I'm doing the best I can, we should really know that it's the best we can do. A lot of times we say I'm doing the best I can because that's all I want to do with this. But it's about becoming radically honest with ourselves, and also about there's always the fear of whether the wisdom is going to be there, and I say don't fear that. When it is genuine compassion has tied to it a certain kind of wisdom. That's what I mean. And part of that wisdom arises through us not feeling sentimental. You don't have to be sentimental to help. You can just help because you look and you see somebody, needs pulling out of a hole, and you have a rope, and there's a tree, you can tie it and knot it around and help him to climb out. But let's just say there's a hole and I have a rope, and he weighs 200 pounds and I weigh 50. When I throw the rope down and try to help, I'm going to end up in the hole with him, because I'm not strong enough to pull him out. So, as wisdom is arising, co-arising with compassion, it lets me see that. Now, if I go beyond that and say, oh no, but I'm a class A Buddhist, I'm supposed to go to the nth mile, then I go and do it anyway and I fall into the hole. It had nothing to do with compassion. It just had to do with my need to be needed, or it had, but now that's selfing that has crept into there, and it's moved out of the neutral, impersonal space into a very personal space. That's what we do. We help our families. I don't care what they did. We get, so now we get into our personal stories as opposed to just staying impersonal. So it's a wonderful life when you can be, when you start to experience the impersonal nature of living. It is a great freedom. I see some people who are 90 years old still trying to control their 70-year-old children. It's really, and angsting over them and telling them what they need to do and all of that. I saw that this past week. He has a question. I saw it this weekend, and I was like, oh, my goodness. I mean, how long? I couldn't wait to get away from it, and that. But the thing is that when a person has been codependent and they get free, they can smell codependency a mile away. They will run, but it truly is a liberation. This renunciation, and it's not a forced thing. It's something that comes naturally, like aging, like growing up, and we start to see things and understand things a different way. I've had many sons and many daughters and many mothers and many fathers and many husbands and many wives. I've had, innumerable, uncountable. This is just the present one. And so it takes on a little different, bent. It's like the person who had one house versus the one who's had 20 houses. And after a while, it becomes a house, not in a flip, don't care way, but you understand, that you don't own anything, not even your children, not even your spouse, not even yourself. No. We'll take her, and then she's over here.
The words you spoke about your heart being your treasure and your treasure being your heart were very beautiful and resonated deeply. But
It's in the Bible.
my question is, how do you trust that what you're hearing as your heart is not really your mind?
Because the mind basically is self-seeking and self-serving. That's its job. Its job is to, like to take care of you. It's the me first thoughts. It's the how will this affect me? It's the bean counter. It's the counting up of the cost. It's the one that's comparing. It's the one that's conceptualizing, thinking about this might happen in the future. It's that whole kind of thing where when something is rising up out of the heart, it's coming from an entirely different space. And you know when it's coming from the heart. Sometimes it's saying while it's coming up, this is going to hurt. But I'm going to do it anyway because I think this is the right thing for me to do. Well, they may not even appreciate it, and still I'm going to do it. And that's different. They rise from two different places. Emerges from two different places. Yeah. Keep my eye on it.
You mentioned bringing groups into your space. Were you doing that with the idea, different religious groups, different belief groups, were you doing that with the idea of bringing people together? Or is that what ultimately happened, or was it just a space for meeting?
When I envisioned Heartwood, you mean?
Well, you said at Heartwood now you say to people, you can come have your meeting here, like say a Jewish group can come in or
Okay, I understand. So yes, part of giving back to the community is to open up space. A lot of churches do it. Even the library does it. So I wanted to have a place where we had some prominence, where we were, the host or the hostess, because it lets people know that you are approachable, that you're giving back to the community. And so I thought it was important in that sense. So yes, groups can hold their meetings there. And then, of course, we have the interfaith meetings. Then we have our regular meetings. There's very few things that I would not allow to be held there. And those would fall in the category of something that I thought was, detrimental to the public, or some teaching or expression that I didn't think rose to the level of the wisdom teachings, something like that. Yeah, so we try to make it a community space. In the East, the monasteries are like that. People spend a lot of their time there. I mean, they go over there and play ball. They play games. We have Dharma movie night, and they're not always Dharma movies, except in most movies are Dharma movies because they're about the issues of life. But we try to find something that has some kind of a dharmic theme, and to encourage people to come together and to fellowship around more than just the Dharma talk and the Dharma sitting, so that it begins to create the kind of comradeship that we can have. A lot of times when people become practitioners, they lose the friendship. They lose some of their friends and even their family relationship with their families. So we try to make sure we always have something on like on Jewish holy days, on Christian holidays, so that they have somewhere to go. We always have a retreat, even if it's only 4 or 5 or 6 people, so that they have somewhere to go on those days. I always have a retreat at Thanksgiving, for the ones who can't sit with their family at Thanksgiving. And so they're grown. Oh no, we're not doing this on Thanksgiving, But yeah, because there's some people who are alone, and that was an important time in their life. Good friend does what's hard to do and gives what's hard to give. Yeah. So thinking in this way. Now they don't even think about it. They just know automatically, what shall we do for this holiday? But in the beginning is, I can't believe you're having something on a holiday. But now it becomes normal. Oh, what shall we do for people on this day? Yeah. And when you're with others who feel this way, it grows, and so more and more I see people finding out that they can be a different person. That person that they always wanted to be, but sometimes it takes us doing it as a joint effort for that to come through for us. And then the happiness comes where they never thought that they'd be happy. There's a gentleman, he lived with us for 6 months, and he's a former banker, and he just got tired of how the banking system is, and like really, really well off, and I'll tell you the truth, hardwood is fairly rustic, Our only fame is that each person has their own bathroom, but I mean, it wouldn't be a place where someone who could afford to go anywhere would go. You know what I mean? There's a lot of top-of-the-line, 5-star meditation centers and things like that. But he came there, and when he was coming, his wife usually stays at home. And I said, well, bring your wife. I said, you're on a spiritual track, but you want to keep your wife too? I said, it's not fair to her for you to be gone these long spurts at a time, 3 and 4 and 5 months. I said, so I, gave them a double cabin so that she could be there with him. But during that time, I worked with him primarily on, he didn't have to give up that life and go and live in these places, and it wasn't that he was trying to get away from his wife. He was like really searching for something, at a great cost. But I spent that time helping him to see that he could live his household life, and he could do his search right where he was, and he didn't have to feel guilty about what he had amassed through his efforts, and to just be ordinary. You can awaken at home, just as well as you can at Heartwood. Matter of fact, I'll be glad to see somebody wake up at Heartwood, myself included. But he got it, and now he is. He's living in the area, and he comes, to Dharma a couple of times a week. They both do, and it's a much better, scenario for his life. It's a much truer way of living, and the guilt that he had now is gone, and the resentment that she had now is gone, and he's making great progress. And before, she wasn't even down with the Buddhist thing, but now she's accompanying him all the time, and she's taking to it, So sometimes we're going overboard doing that efforting, trying too hard, and not looking for the freedom that's in every step. Yeah. Yes.
I'm not quite sure how to make the comment I want to make, but I was thinking how much I enjoy the way you bring music into the practice, and joy and laughter. And then when you commented that in Western Buddhism, perhaps we took that community, some of the community out when in our practices here in the West. that retreats are silent. So you come together and then you don't talk to each other, which has always felt a little cold to me. And so it's making me wonder about, we're always bemoaning the fact that in a lot of insight meditation communities, the faces are very often white, and how do we overcome that? And I really wonder if we've stripped away some of the things that, some of the heart and movement and soul that might appeal to people who aren't in the room, and if we've lost something in the practices. I mean, when I went to Christian churches, the music drew me in more than anything. And then we're without that now. So I really loved what you added. And I don't know if you have any thoughts you'd like to share on that.
Well, no, I try to put my thoughts into practice, and if people think I've gone off on the wrong end, then they just don't participate. But I believe that, Buddha was dealing with something specific with his group. If you've ever been to India, you know what I mean. In terms of overstimulation, there's a holy man on every corner. There's 10,000 beads and 50 million statues, and it's just like a total overstimulation. And I can imagine it was from his day all the way up to today. But when you look and see how all of that devotion, how it didn't just filter down into the betterment of society at all, even down to today. It's still there. And he said, that's much more. And when he first started, his first disciples, they were people of his own class. He didn't like get enlightened and he went down to the railroad tracks and got all the bombs. No, he went back to all the friends that he knew who enjoyed the lifestyle that he had, the going to the shows and the excesses and all of that. And those are the ones that he ministered to first. So these were people who that's making merry, spending money because they didn't work. This was his first group of students, and then it just kept branching out and out and out. And so the thing about the awakened mind is it looks and it sees what the need of the people are that you are with, or that you're tending to. And I think that's what's really important. The only reason I bring up, it doesn't have to be music, whatever awakens us to joy, that's what we should do. I mean, that's what awakens me to joy, so that's what I do. And I waited a long time to do it because it was, it's forbidden. It was forbidden, but in my room, I would sing, and in my room, I would dance. But, it was just all around a spiritual elation. And elation is different from emotionalism. Those who don't have it call that emotion, but that's the same way that certain things are lumped or categorized, like compassion is weak, and that's why women can't be in charge of things, because we're too weak. But it's just a misunderstanding of qualities that through just our human ignorance we have a misconception of things. So it's funny that actually in the wisdom traditions, the wisdom is the feminine principle and compassion is the masculine. And it's all turned around right now, but as we start turning it setting upright what's been turned over, I think we're going to see a great shift in our capacities, you know, to arise to a higher wisdom and compassion, because women have a lot of wisdom and men have a great capacity for compassion. And because things are out of balance, you know, it's not showing up quite right. But I think we're headed, you know, in the right direction. Yeah. So what I do know is that coming into this diaspora, there are things that we have already experienced in certain ways, certain methods, and certain trainings. And how can we use those that were meaningful to us in a way to, you know, to support us on the path? And sometimes we, and if they are, I think we should use them. It's not the method that matters. It's a method that you know, that works. That we should think about. We're not made for the method any more than we're made for the rule. The rule is made to help us, you know, to provide a safety or a track for us to move on. So how it can help you. I have to say that I was part of the Davidic praise and worship movement of the 80s or 70s. I think maybe late 70s and the 80s into the early 90s. And when that movement hit the churches, it was fantastic. And it really lifted people, but it's become like entertainment now. So, you know, nothing, you know, when unenlightened minds get their hands on things, you know, what happens to it. And so I listen to some of the music today, and I look at what's happening. I mean, they got them set up like, what do you call those places where you go and dance? What do you call them? Yeah, well, something like that. You know, like they have the lights, they have, yeah, all of that, and they're like in a frenzy, like at a rage, right, and stuff like that. You know, and it has to become like a feel good thing. And I can tell you that one time when I had the teens, and we did have a non-alcoholic dance club for them. They were kids. They needed to let off steam, and they could have their music. And in our town, if you had the church, you couldn't have music, you know. So I had a little club for them. And when we would take pictures, the room would be full of orbs, you know. And so when I look at other pictures of people who are like in these like really like holy or sacred environments, and they're full of orbs, and I say, yeah, well, you know, in the club they're full of orbs too. That's a classification of being that feeds off of the energy, the emotions, you know, of people, and that's what they're drawn to. So you can't just say, well, because, you know, this is a holy place, because it happens in the clubs too. And that's my story on orbs. If anybody's like enamored with them, they're just beings who feed on the high emotions, you know, of people. Yeah. Yes.
I wanted to respond to your question. I don't think it's the issue of music as much as it is a sense of feeling welcome. I'm nervous here, and I wasn't going to say this, but I have to say it. So the first time I came, this is my second time here, and the first time I came here, I don't think any more than 3 people greeted me. And there were more people in this room then than there are now. And so I didn't come back. And the only reason I'm here today is because this presenter, wonderful presenter, is here. So I think you need to think about that. If you're trying to attract more people from different backgrounds, how do you welcome them and greet them when they come into your space?
So thank you for that comment. And one way we can do that, because there's two ways to think of it. Sometimes people want to be welcome, but what I can't stand is a whole bunch of people get in my face like they like me, and they don't even know me, And so it could be taken either way, like too much, or not enough. But one good way for a song, I remember you all asked me one year, Pannavati, how do we attract more people of color at our song? And I said, well, I don't know. When you find out, let me know, because my song is all white. And so, and now it's, like I've been there now, 14, 56, 17, 19, 15 years, and it's still all white. And I've had 2 people of color who's come into my sangha, and they looked in that room and they didn't come back. And I really did try to make them feel comfortable and feel welcome. But one thing I could say is that maybe there is a greeter who's assigned, so that when they greet the person coming in, and then when the service is over, I don't know what you call yours, I call mine a service, but when it's over, make sure that they find that person and ask them, did they have any questions, make sure they sign the guest thingy, and thank them for coming. Did you know that person has been tended to, and they've been made, to feel welcome. So you have to play around with the not too much, the not too little, the just right. Yeah. But I asked the question, like, well, how many people of color do you know? How many do you hang out with? How many do you have lunch with? How many come over to your house? How many, do you, you just can't put up a sign that says black folks want it, And so, it may take a long time. The other side of that is that a lot of us have found something deeply meaningful in our current spiritual tradition. So, like, a lot of us are not looking. Some of us are looking, but this is like decidedly, as you say, a little bit too frozen for us. So it's many reasons. It's not just that, like that we haven't been welcoming. It's not just. It's no one thing. And so when a person of color comes in, if we could just, with that heart that I was talking about today, like just cultivating that real heart. A person knows that, like we like our radar is high, and a person really feeling welcome, can make a big difference. And then when they come in and see there's only one, it must be for a reason, like we're thinking going through the whole tick list, and so, yeah, it's complicated, yeah. It's complicated. She's over here, and then she's right behind her.
I really appreciated your story, your personal story of having that bedrock of Christianity and then going on that search and all the different theologies that you went over, and I recognized my own search in there, and I wonder if you know about the fairly new translation of Mary Magdalene's book, The Beloved Companion, where it describes the historical Jesus in his time and her experience in the group as almost, it just feels like Buddhist, introspective and meditative and not, sin and sacrifice and, the more traditional renderings of Christianity. And it made me wonder, would the historical Jesus know about Buddha?
Well, he was a Nazarene, and where he grew up in Capernaum, that was like along the trade route, the Silk Road, So in those days, all of the ports, not only did they bring silk and they brought incense, and they brought other fabrics, and they brought things from India and China and all of those places, but they also brought their teachings. And people would go there to hear the latest teachings. So I mean, we can't say, but I know that before I was even thinking, years before I was thinking about just thinking of stepping outside of the church was not even a thought. I got a hold of something, that of a Buddhist book, and when I read it, I was astounded. I said, well, this is what Jesus said. But he was 500 years earlier, and I took it to my pastor, and I was like, look at this. She said, oh, but he said, all who came before me were thieves and robbers, And so that ended the whole discussion. And so, I could have had been on the journey a lot sooner, but, I was condemned for even the thought that there could be, that was a possibility. But my own personal opinion is yes, and my own personal opinion is that Jesus is a bodhisattva. I think he's still present in the world, making himself known. And I make no apology about that, because I get the comfort, the aid, and the assistance, and that's what's real to me. And so when other people are doing, we have in Vajrayana, there are different practices, and we call dharmas. We call the practices that we do dharmas. We call this the dharma, in Theravada, but the actual practices, we call those dharmas. And what we do in our Vajrayana practices is we bring the result onto the path. So in our meditations, we are, during that time we're sitting there, we're cultivating the mind of the Buddha, or the mind of Kuan Yin, or what it would be like if I had her perfect qualities. And we start thinking, I do have her perfect qualities. They're all resident in me, and we're working at bringing as if we are already enlightened for that time that we're sitting, and what that, and what that is like, refining a character. And then when we end it, then we fold back and release that imagery, if you will, or that mind stream, and we just come back to being ourselves. But as we do that, it's like taking a bath. Every time you're just constantly washing. You're constantly covering yourself with an idea that you possess, the kindness, the wisdom, the capacity, the strength, of Manjushri or Shakyamuni Buddha or what. And so those are what we call dharmas, actually spending time drenching ourselves in certain qualities. That's a skillful means. So on one hand, something can be also real in the world, and it can also be something that we used as a skillful method for training the mind. Both of those can be true. So, for instance, if I were to say I'm wondering what to do, and I don't know what to do, and I don't know what to do, and then I think, but I have the mind of Christ, then I'm telling myself, and then I begin to relax in this mind that I possess, that can make a right decision, that can think and judge fairly. Because, if that's your faith, if that's what you really do believe. And then before you know it, you know that it works for those that have this direct experience. That you settle down, that conceptualizing mind quiets down, and you drop, and then you say, something told me, I got this, I got this impulse, I got this unction to do something, so it has its own language, And then we can flow in that. We have that inner confidence that this is the right action to take. I can't just Google the right action. I have to develop a knowing within myself, and that comes, sometimes through trial and error. But we're going to do trial and error anyway, And so it's something like that. So it's So it's not that if I say that I have, I have the mind of Christ, and clarity, clarity can come now. I'm convinced that clarity can come now. I can know what action I should take. And I can sit here and wait for that knowing to arise in me. That doesn't mean that I don't think that Jesus is a bodhisattva and that he is functioning in the world today. I believe that, and I believe I have the mind of Christ. So it's something like that. And I do it the same way with the Dharma. So I do Vajrayana practices, and I've had to do a lot of building in a very short period of time. But I have a particular bodhisattva whose mind stream I identify, and she's an overcomer of obstacles, and I really do overcome obstacles when Pannavati gets out of the way. When Pannavati's in the way, she's in a conundrum about what to do, But when I'm thinking, that I'm Savarvanik Vishkabim, and that the overcomer of obstacles, that mind, that great far-seeing wisdom, and then I sit with that, and then, a short time later, the answer comes. It just manifests because all of my cloudy thinking gets put at peace. So it's just luminous, clear mind comes forward. In Shinyan, that's what they call it. They call it silent illumination, So they call that Buddha mind, Buddha nature, silent illumination. And the Buddha says, dwell you are the light itself. Rely on yourself. Do not rely on others. Then he says the Dharma is that light. Rely on the Dharma. Do not rely on anything other than the Dharma. And so he's telling us that the Dharma is in us because the Dharma is our essential nature, that Buddha nature, that awakened mind. So when I'm dwelling, that light he's talking about is that all-wise knowing nature. And if I get still enough and cut back the chatter and the partial, I won't say they're wrong voices, but the partial voices of the world, because we see in part and we know in part, we hear a little bit here, and we think a little bit there, and so we don't have a full enough story. We come away with the wrong conclusion. But when I get still, then the light shines up from within me. That's why all the sages, across every tradition, they talk about there being this light, a luminosity, a brightness, that sort of thing. So we are not far away, what can be apprehended. We're only limited by our own tenacious clinging to whatever perceptions and views that we have. Yes.
And, I want you all to understand, and just being here today has made me realize this. It's like, based on my history and based on the history of this country, when I came here and nobody spoke to me, I was thinking, oh, I'm not going right there because I don't feel welcome. But I wanted to come here because I wanted to be with a group of people, with a community that does what you do. And now I'm saying I should come back. I should come back and back and back and back time and time again. And I know that people would have welcome me. So,
Yeah, see, it's not always like, he didn't feel welcome, but whose feelings are those? Whose are they? Whose feelings? That's a question. His. They were his feelings. And they were his feelings, and they were genuine and true to him, but then that didn't mean it was right, though. You know what I'm saying? Because I know you. They're good peeps. I know you, and so sometimes we can have a feeling. Our feeling is based on the experiences that we've had, of places that we've been, where people didn't say anything to you and they meant, like, what are you doing in here? I mean, really, it's like that. So one can't really know. And that's how so many misunderstandings and missed opportunities and misperceptions come about. So this is normal. She's over here. So this is normal, but recognize we don't have to feel bad about it when someone misunderstands or when someone comes. We'll have to learn. If nobody's been coming, you haven't had much practice, on what's the right amount of welcoming, not too much, not too little, just right. And it takes time to get to just right. Yes.
Hi.
Hi.
So I've been coming here off and on for a couple of years, and at this point in my life, and probably since early adulthood, I've celebrated difference. I look to be around people that are different from myself. I experiment with different forms of spirituality, and at this point in my life, most of my friends and people in my community where I live are people of color, Latinos, black people, Muslims, whatever. And I come from this. I'm educated, I have a psychology degree, I came from an upper middle class, all white place. And it's disturbed me when I come here. And then I hear from you, blow me over with a feather. You have an all-white saying. Because I'm like, I'm going to go down to North Carolina. That'll be different. That'll be different. And then, on the other hand, occasionally, as in your case, sir, I see one person of color, and I don't want to go, hey, look, hi. Because, like you were saying, you don't, you know what I mean? So I apologize if you didn't feel welcome. Because I'm glad you're here, and I'm trying to figure out every day how to welcome my own friends, to have them come here. But it's such an alien concept to them, and they're like, I ain't going to just sit there. So I don't, I sort of think, well, I'm not practiced enough or to go out into my community and say, okay, we're all going to sit down and meditate, because they'll be like, what are you doing? And I don't. You see what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm. I do.
So it's frustrating, and I really believe that we would all benefit if more of us collectively did what we're doing here.
So I think it's good to have a sangha where we all come. But if we're getting something, we're getting it for ourselves. So if I'm living in a community, and nobody will come to this, maybe there's something that they see in me. They can just come over to my house, and we just start having casual conversations, and we start sitting for 15 minutes and just sing. It's more than, how your parents told you to just breathe. There's something so phenomenal about just stilling the mind, settling the mind. And this is how it starts. You see, it's not hocus pocus. It's not a Buddha god. It's nothing like that, And so maybe sometimes, and then when somebody's coming, they're coming with you, as opposed to showing up, but they've already had some experience that's made them want more. Like I say, you can't answer a question that hasn't been asked. It was only when I asked the question and I was looking that I was open to finding something. But when I wasn't, and to a great extent, in those who have been in the church are still pretty much set with with certain notions, and only when that's not enough for you will you ask the question or be open enough to look. And then you got to deal with the guilt or the fear if you've actually really believed that's deeply entrenched, But then, and then I also don't think that there are enough people in just within the Buddhist Sangha in the West that can dialogue, that can answer the questions that didn't leave the church mad. Well, I was mad when I left. But I didn't stay mad, I realized where I had missed something, and so most of us don't know how to talk with Christians who may be teetering. Because they're going to come from somewhere. But the good news is that, it could be good news, is that most young people that I'm meeting today never were in the church, because it's been 2 generations or 3. I don't know. I'm getting old, and they weren't in the church. So I have to find a new way to reach them, and so that's what's opening up this year with the singing. They go to festivals for their spirituality, And so when I was teaching out at Naropa a few weeks ago, I decided, I do this in my Sangha, but I don't do it outside of the Sangha. But I decided I was going to do it at Naropa. And I did. And like the young people loved it. And there were 2 concert or festival, whatever you call people who put on festivals. Promoters, yeah. And thank you. And there were 2 festival promoters there. And they asked me to, come and do a sacred music workshop, and I know what I'm going to do. I'm going to take a pianist, a cellist, and a guitar player, and we're going to go out there and we're going to spontaneously compose a song, and we're all going to put it on, and we're going to have fun at it. But that's an example. So now I can, and that's just how things work. You know what I'm saying? So when we live our truth, even though it may seem strange to somebody else, we don't know what call has gone out to the universe and what we're responding to, and if I don't do it, well, don't worry, because when the call goes out, many people hear it, so even if you miss it, somebody will pick up the slack, no worries. It's not like you're the only one. If you don't do it, this is not going to happen. But how wonderful that we can hear a call, and we can effortlessly and selflessly respond. That's that unified mind. Just getting into that unified feel. There's no way I could have set that up. It's no way. I didn't even know that that's where the young people go. They schooled me while I was there. They said, we go to festivals and get our spirituality on for a week, and then we go back and we live in the world, and we don't want the old model. But now when I go, I can tell you, there's going to be some that want to come to Heartwood, and but not everybody is needing the music. They're just going for a place where they feel, a non-traditional, just a free spirituality is what I'm saying. So that's not like they just have to have music, but they just want to be around heartful people, people who are genuine, because they think that our generation and the one after mine let them down, and to a great extent we did. Yeah, we got to own that. Yes.
I loved the song we sang. Is there any chance that you all will make a CD? I would love to have the spiritual words to contemporary songs.
We are, because while I was there was also a foundation guy, and he gave me a grant to get some real equipment. He said, what would you like to do with that? And I said, I'd like for us to have some good equipment, like so we can have the voices right, and to hire a voice coach for us. And, because this will be like sort of like the first coming out of anything that's not an Eastern chant, and then we have to buy the rights to use some of the tunes, get permission to use some of the tunes. And so he gave me a grant for that. And so that's like everybody, you're just being available. That's what I'm saying to you. Just show up. You don't have to what should I be doing? What should I be doing? Just, just be there with whatever's showing up in your life. You will hear it. It's not like a conk on the head and says, Diane, do this. Jim, go there. But there will be a drawing, and you'll see something come up. And I know something about that. One of my friends, my students, is an artist, and now I got hooked up with her Sumie teacher, and we're going to have a Zen retreat come Christmas, and we're going to learn about the art of Sumie, because they meditate sometimes 3-4 hours, and then when the urge strikes them, they dip the brush into the ink, and they draw from whatever's flowing from the heart. So it's not like art like this. It's a whole nother thing, and I can't wait to experience it and to allow some people to experience it. So then we're going to do that in December. So it's that way, just showing up and being available, and to allow new things to come through you, and you'll draw some. Yeah. Yes.
Yeah, I guess what Thich Nhat Hanh says, you get these knots. I got one in my heart. It's hard to talk about. But anyway, it happened, I was watching TV some years ago, and it was a show on black and white TV. And it was in, over in one of those countries in Eastern Europe. And it was on the TV, and they were talking about it, and they were loading all these young girls on the bus, taking them off to a rape camp. They were going to rape them until they were pregnant and then let them go. It was on the TV, everybody saw it. What disturbed me so much was that there was no more comments. There was no protest. There was no people saying this is beyond what we can tolerate. Some years later, the same guy in Milosevic, and they run a bunch of people over the river, and the Scandinavian countries got upset, and we got in, and we went over with our F-16s and straight to tank columns, and he turned down and ran. And the thing that happened with me is I was not wanting to be a member of Western society anymore. I mean, these people had cars, buses, schools, libraries, and they were going to make all these babies and then turn them motherless. There's no way for them to support themselves. And to me, there comes a place where if you're going to have weapons and an army and something that far entirely out of bounds of anything that I can imagine, and you're just going to sit there and stand around and watch. It's just not a society I want to be a member of, and stand around and watch, and that's the knot. and it kind of just sits there. I'm sort of wanting to be mostly a, what do you call it, if I could say conscious objector. But in certain cases, like I was too old to fight, but I thought maybe I'll need a plumber. I want to go join that army. There's no army to go join. There's a point where I believe you need to stand up and say, it's just too far out of there. And I don't know what the thing is. Should I bring it up and meditate on it once a week? How do we not on that? It's a physical not thing.
So I understand what you mean, and it's times like that when our heart is really troubled by some of the things that we've witnessed and some of the things that we know go on in this world. And so some people believe that that there's the possibility for this world to become all good. It's like heaven on earth, but heaven is heaven and earth is earth. And samsara, in the whole, the Buddha says that in the whole scheme of things, this is a place that is a place of suffering. He said that it's a world where you have, he said some worlds have beings with same minds, same bodies. Some have different minds, different bodies. Some have same minds, different bodies. Some have different minds, same bodies. This was the world that had different minds and different bodies. And he said, how can you expect them to agree, and how can this be a peaceful place? And so it's not going to be possible to transform this into a heavenly realm. You have to be on a heavenly realm to experience heaven. So that's part of the understanding that we have in the larger cosmology. And then it says if a person wants to be in a place in a utopia or where there's nothing like this, then do whatever you need to do so that on the passing out of this life you won't be born back in this realm again. That's for sure. And he says there is, when his own clan, they used to always be fighting with the clan on the other side of the water. They'd be fighting over the waterway most of the time. And every time they got ready to go into battle, they would look for the Buddha. The Buddha would go down and say, don't fight. There's enough water for both of you to share or whatever. And time again, they would, he would waylay the battle. But ultimately, they kept warring. And finally, the other clan won, and it wiped out the Buddhist clan. So that's how none of his folk continued on with him, because they were like, this is the awakened one. He's too impotent to even deliver his own clan. He said, that's not what I do. He says, I deliver you from samsara, not from fighting your neighbor. I can point you to that ultimate deliverance. So we're going to be in this world, and we're going to see atrocities. There's no way not to, because it goes with this realm, And so he says, in that sense, there is never any excuse for us. And that's why the very first precept that he laid down was not to kill, And sometimes it's hard. Like if you ask me, I asked Pannavati one day, I said, what would you do, Pannavati, if somebody was kicking in the door, like the economy crashed and people were hoarding and they were breaking houses, looting for food and so on. I said, what would you do if somebody, kicked in this door? He said, I would try to defend you. I said, what would you do if we had a gun? Like, we don't have one. I said, but if we had one, what would you do? Would you use it? He said, no, I wouldn't do that. I said, wait a minute, what you saying? He said, I said, you would let somebody kick in this door and kill me when you had a gun that could protect me? He said, yes, I would. And I said, well, I just have to think about how I feel about that. Really. Because I felt, and probably still do that if push came to shove, and that was the only way, I would probably do that, you know. And I've been working on that ever since he told me that, which was 4 or 5 years ago. I was upset with him. Now I'm not upset. That is perfectly his right, and I'm glad that he could come to that resolution. You know, I haven't quite gotten there yet, you know. Now, as far as giving my life for another, that's a no-brainer for me. You know, I know I would easily take a bullet for somebody. You know, not even somebody I know. I'd take a bullet for a stranger. But whether I would, you know, take a life, I hate to say it, but I feel like I might, you know, and I have to keep looking at that until I'm sure that I won't, you know. But that's where I am. But he was at that place. He said, no, I wouldn't. You know, and so we grow in these spaces. And that's why I say we have to, you know, we have to go with what we can go with. And while we can't save the whole world, we can look and see what we can do somewhere. And we might think that what little bit of help we give is insignificant. You know, but every little bit counts, and none of it is insignificant. And remember that the least, you know, take care of matters while they're small. There's some things that are escalating. They're escalating because we're not handling them. You know, some things have escalated because we've seen it. I mean, some people come to me in my own community and say, Pannavati, you know, now that we've done this, you know, racial, these workshops and so forth, says, you know, I didn't realize this and I didn't see that. And I'm like, oh, so you blind? You know? But they were like, no, it just wasn't close enough to concern you. You knew it wasn't right, but you just didn't want to get involved, or you didn't want to, you know, like you got your own family to protect. Well, then just say that. I saw it, but I couldn't take action. I've hated it when they sat around the table and they talked about people in this way or whatever. You know, we can just acknowledge that we were too afraid to stand up because we didn't want to be ostracized, or you know, we didn't want to lose our friends or whatever, you know, but we can do that without guilt, is what I'm saying. No, we can just recognize. And how wonderful that there's coming this time now that it's out on the table, and we can, there's a little bit more support for more open dialogues. And then when we have them, you know, really have them. First thing is that we have to listen to what some folk have to say. It's like whenever I say we because, you know, like I'm always with the white folk, but whenever we get into a group and we want to help make something better, we always got to lead. We always got to get in the front, you know, and that's that same master mentality. So you start leading the movement of the black folks. You got to get behind sometimes. You have to get in the back. You know, an ally can't lead the brigade. Ally support. And so that's why I had a difficulty when the letter was sent, speaking of the support for teachers of color that came from an organization that had 1,100 teachers and could only find 11 black people that they thought were qualified enough to teach in 30 years. And they don't send me nothing about how you support blacks and give me an opportunity to sign on with you. I sent that letter back, you know, because it was the wrong way to come. And so that's what I'm saying, you know. Sometimes we are so used to being in a certain position, even when we're trying to help. We only know how to be in that posture or that position. So there's going to be some time of learning. We're wanting to take action, but we haven't learned enough about who we want to take action to support yet. And so we have to step back and go through some of these times. But then when we do come forth, we come forth in a very united way, not bickering amongst ourselves, or not having our Tuesdays for people of color and Thursdays for white folks, and not, you know, all of these kinds of things. We won't have that. But it just all starts with this cultivating the heart, the good heart, and continually looking until you see the other as oneself, you know. considering everyone, your kind mother, doing these kinds of practices until our own stony hearts, are washed away and replaced with a heart of flesh. And that's something that cannot be hidden. That's something that can be easily known. And when people come into a room, they will feel it because you have no fear of them. They have no fear of you. They'll just feel open and welcome. And the last thing I want to say is sometimes the timing is not right. Because we have two different groups who've had two very different life experiences. While some of you are learning to skydive and all of that, we're trying to figure out how to get a loaf of bread. It's a like just in a socio-economic sense in two different places. So like while you're trying to get enlightenment, we're trying to get a job. It's very different things. And so sometimes it's a little unrelatable because we're going like this right now. But in time will catch up with some things. You just keep planting the seeds and planting the seeds. One plants, another waters. But someone is going to get the harvest. Yeah? So this has been a wonderful retreat. I thank you so much for coming, and may you be well, may you be peaceful, may no harm come to you, may no danger, may you always be able to meet with the inevitable difficulties of life.